Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll Religion. Sorry, no camera today, but I just moved into a new setup, so I'm still getting things arranged and all that. So bear with me while I go through that little transition. And we got an interesting band for you today that me and my co-host have been talking about forever. We were finally getting to it. We've been meaning to for ages. It's just never come up. But we are finally going back down the dark and evil path of black metal. And who better to do that with than our Sherpa of heresy himself, Imperitus. How's it going, man?
What's going on, man? Another wonderful Sunday here in New York.
Yeah,
Technically,
I
it's
mean,
not.
I heard you guys have been getting hammered with weather lately.
Eh, Not really. I mean, it rained yesterday, but not that bad. I
Okay.
mean, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, something like that, there was a storm where we got some hail.
Well,
That was always entertaining.
that's always at least interesting. Spice your day up a little bit. And
Yeah, I mean, nothing like driving to work going, what the hell's that banging sound? Seeing a chunk of ice bounce off the hood of my truck, like, oh, well, that's going to make a fun trip running into the store.
what's that banging sound? And for once, it wasn't the sacrifice in your trunk.
Yeah.
But speaking of weather, you said it on the stream before, and it really is true that being in certain types of weather puts you in the right mindset for a band. And yesterday, when I was doing the research for this, and it was kind of raining and shitty out, and it's just like, I get it. Like this is meant
Yeah.
for this type of stuff. And of course, we are talking about the black metal masters is Marduk. And yeah, these guys are old school, like one of the first second wave bands,
hmm
right at the same time as like Mayhem and Emperor started doing their stuff. And holy shit, what a first couple records for these guys.
Most of their output has been solid.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to the rest of their stuff. We're going to skip a little bit in their discography today, just because there's one album I really, really want to get to, and the rest we can come back and talk about later if we really want to. And then, but yeah, their first couple releases, including their EP that got banned in 7 countries. If you want to
I'm not
tell us
sure.
a
I don't
little bit
remember
about
which
that one.
seven, but yeah, their demo EP, because the demo had come out. They originally signed to No Fashion Records out of Sweden, which put out Dark Endless, their first disc.
Yeah,
Then they left No Fashion for whatever reason and went to a French label called Osmos. And they were going to release the demo as an EP, and no, they ran into problems.
yeah. Well, in everyone's defense, when you name your EP "Fuck Me Jesus" in 1989, I would assume you're going to run into problems with that
Mm, one would think.
because the whole black metal thing hadn't really caught on yet, or at least hadn't caught on in the minds of like normal people. So
89, yeah, no, the second wave hadn't really started yet.
yeah, and I think people were just getting used to bands like Venom and Bathory coming through and kind of showing off the darker side of the scene, and not a lot of people were comfortable with it.
Well, also bear in mind too, 89 was the year of the first Cannibal Corpse record.
Yeah, so extreme metal was still kind of in its infancy there. I mean, you had thrash come up in the 80s, but that was really as hard as it went for most things. And then,
Yeah.
you have, like you say, you have Cannibal Corpse coming out in like 88, 89, really starting to really expand that darker side of metal.
I believe the first Death record was about that era too.
Yeah, I think 88 was when they got started. So like they are all right about the late 80s. And that's one of the cool things about this genre too, is you start seeing the same sounds pop up in different places on the planet at the same time.
hmm
So
It's
it's
like
like
I
clearly
was saying
more
to
than
a friend
one
of mine
person had this
recently,
idea.
metal's a universal language.
Yeah, and it's clear that like, more than one, area of people and different artists saw where the genre was headed and kind of went in the same direction independently. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, the first album we're going to really get into today, other than their EP, which you should check out if you can find it. It's fairly
It did eventually get released as an EP. So
yeah,
Fuck Me
but
Jesus is out there somewhere. I'm not sure who released it.
yeah, it's out in the ether somewhere. It's probably on YouTube. I didn't look.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much everything is on YouTube, including one of the albums we're going to talk about today that's not on Spotify anymore, even though it used to be.
Really?
Yep, I found that out when
The
I was
one,
going to do the
the one
research
I'm
for this.
thinking of.
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. Well, again, that's not entirely surprising.
Yeah, but we'll get to that in its own time. But the first album we're going to talk about is Dark Endless, and holy shit, look at the album art for that.
Yeah, the album art was always cool. They've always had good album art.
Yeah, and really representative of what you're about to experience.
Well, at the time though, too, this was you could definitely hear their death metal roots in this release.
Yeah, you could. They had some, especially later in the album with like the title track or Holy Inquisitor, where they have kind of some of that like slow, almost doom metal riffage in the beginning of their stuff, and then the blast beats kick in.
Yeah.
It's very reminiscent of some early death metal. So, like, I love when you can kind of like kind of see exactly where they're building off of and like see the influences.
Some bands you can do that with, others you can't. Example where you really can't would be Dark Throne.
Yeah, they just kind of went for it.
I mean, well, you can a little bit because you had Soulside Journey, which was straight death metal.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
There's no I guess. It was.
Yeah, I just forgot about that album altogether.
And then when they did A Blaze in the Northern Sky, it still had some of that death metal influence.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
not in the same way as you hear with Marduk here.
Yeah, I mean, Marduk is kind of the borderline between death and black metal, and they kind of jump across it depending on what they're talking about.
Maybe the first two records. Once you hit Opus Nocturne, it's just pure black metal at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, once you get to like the last album we're going to talk about today, it's pretty much just straight black metal, which I could not be happier about. But yeah,
though I will say the two tracks I've heard that from them for their current release is just not good.
Yeah, I've been underwhelmed by their most recent one, Memento Mori, and that's unfortunate because Marduk was one of the ones that, because there's an endless list of black metal bands that have come in really knocked it out of the park with their first couple albums and then sucked. See also Dark Throne.
Oh, them was more than a couple, but
well, yeah, but
yeah,
you have like a series of really good records and then they just fall off.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether it's lineup changes or they just don't have the mentality for that kind of music anymore, but then they just kind of disappear off the face of the earth. And
yeah,
Marduk kind of hadn't.
No, they haven't. Neither has Dark Funeral.
Yeah, they've been around a while too. And I would say Emperor, but they haven't released a new album in like 20 years. So
yeah, I don't know if they're actually considered to be together as a band at this point or just reform every once in a while to go do like some festivals.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where you'll see them is like every summer they do the festival tours in Europe, and that's about it. Which may or may not be because, they have real jobs to go to. But yeah, I mean, even in some of the song titles on Dark Endless, like you say, you can kind of hear some of the death metal influence, like Eye of Funeral or Still Fucking Dead. Stuff like that. The Funeral seemed to be endless. Like even Holy Inquisition and Dark Endless are.
I believe it was the funeral seemed to be endless. Yeah. They did a remix of that recently.
Did they?
Yes, and it's exceptional.
I'll have to check that out then, because I intentionally went for the original version of this record. I saw that they had a remaster out, but I didn't.
I don't know if it's on the remaster or not.
It's like, yeah, I mean, they branded it on
let's see here.
Yeah, let's see here. I know
it's called the Black Crowned version.
Okay. I'll have to look that up then, because I intentionally went for the
yeah, it's
original
like
mix.
the rift has been extended.
Okay.
You know, it's got a little bit more of a thrashier sound.
Ooh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, you'd hear it and go, wait a minute, why don't they just do more stuff like this?
Yeah, that's always the interesting thing when they remaster albums and you're like, yes, that's what you should have done originally. Why didn't you?
Yeah, it's from their 2002 album Black Crown,
Okay.
which is a bunch of like covers and you know, demo recordings and rehearsal recordings and things like that.
Which, depending on the band, can be either great or, there's a reason it wasn't released in the first place. But it does give you a look into the kind of the behind the scenes and the creative process with the band. So those are sometimes pretty good listens. And yeah, Soul Assassin, like that's what I mean. But like the art on these albums is very representative of what you're about to listen to. Because like
yeah, the covers
art.
on Black Crown are pretty interesting too. They do a Venom cover, 2 Sam Hain covers, and a Misfits cover.
Nice, that's pretty decent.
And a Rolling Stones cover.
That one might get interesting.
They cover Paint It Black.
Oh, okay. Well, can do that one, I guess. But yeah, like the album art on all of their records is extremely indicative of like,
aside from the remasters that they released, because they remastered the first 6 albums, I think, maybe more.
Oh, okay.
But they changed the art, the album art. Yeah, if you look them up, you'll see it's like,
Yeah, I hate that. Where it's just like, no, keep the album art original. Like it was supposed, like that's the art that goes with that record. Keep it.
Yeah, there. Like they took the art for Heaven Shall Burn when we were gathered.
Yeah.
And instead of that glorious art that they had for that, it was just like a black background with a little bit of it was very, very simplistic. It fits for black metal, but not to be used in place of other album art, in my opinion.
And that was one of the things that always made Marduk stand out from a lot of the other second wave bands is, like you say, a lot of black metal art is very simplistic and very dark and stuff like that. And this is very colorful, very almost like an oil painting, but it's very elaborate, but it's very dark. So in terms of its tone and stuff like that. So like that fits with the records. And I don't like the fact that they change the album art when they come in with a remaster. It's like, no, that, like I said, that's the art that goes with that record. Leave it alone. If you want to clean up the sound a little bit or whatever, so be it.
The remasters are actually quite good as far as sound quality.
Yeah, which is interesting for second wave black metal, because a lot of them, the original master was pretty rough.
Yeah.
I can't say that with Marduk, though. The production quality on a lot of these early albums is still fairly high. Maybe that's that death metal influence that hadn't left them yet, because the production on a lot of the early death metal stuff was still pretty good, too. More on the thrash side than, black metal, where it sounds like it was recorded on somebody's answering machine.
Yeah.
But that's good to hear that they're actually remastering old stuff and like still remember their old stuff, because a lot of bands, when they actually do make it big and start going into the main part of their career, they like pretend their first few albums never happened, looking at Pantera.
Yeah.
And in the case of Pantera, those albums aren't even available for sale anymore.
Yeah. I mean,
you can find them if you're clever, though. It's all secondhand, but you can get them if you really want them. I have a copy.
Let me show you that album art real quick.
Yeah, we'll see if you can share that.
Yeah, it's pretty just, where did you go? There it is.
And yeah, Soul Assassin, Maiden has been famous for that in the past, where like they refuse to play their classic stuff and go with all of their newer songs that no one wants, and then get mad when people tell them to play the classics. It's like, that's what we want, dude. That's why you're here. But yeah, let's see what this has got here. And yeah, that's like mid-tier Venom art.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Now,
not bad, but it's fairly simplistic.
yeah. Now let me
And
see if I have a image of what the original art looked like.
yeah, because that art is something else. Because that's a big part of the whole experience of the record is the art, the tone around it, the sound of the record itself. Like, that's what it's supposed to be. And that's what also I, will always advocate that you buy physical media because they can't remaster a physical copy.
Right.
As long as they still work, obviously. If you have a cassette of it, I hate to break this to you, but those things only last about 20 years.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
they demagnetize and it's gone. Same thing with VHS tapes, unfortunately. It's just a limitation of the tech, which is why cassettes didn't last that long in terms of the primary mode of most people's music. That, and they sucked to use. I'm sure you've had one unwind on you in the player before.
Mm-hmm.
That's always a fun time. Yeah. Yeah, this was the original art for Heaven Shall Burn When We Are Gathered, and like, it almost seems like a dark power metal album cover, right?
Yeah. Yeah. To a degree. I
Yeah, because
don't
you got like
really.
all these orcs with spears and shit, and the castle in the background. Like, it kind of hits that vibe, but darker.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this isn't Lord of the Rings. This is Warhammer Fantasy,
Yeah. Pretty much.
where and they do have some fantasy elements in some of their stuff. Not much, but
Not
it,
much. I mean, they do
it kind
more
of slips in there every
historical.
now and again.
Like the second half of Nightwing is all about Vlad Tepes,
Yeah, that's true.
the historical Dracula.
Yeah,
So,
so you get some historical stuff, especially later on. You get some kind of fantasy element stuff, especially around legends and stuff like that with Marduk's lyrics. And I've always liked that, is exploring some of the extremely dark metal and kind of mythology of Europe. It's
well,
like reading a Brothers Grimm fairy tale. It's like, it's the Germans. These stories never end well.
yeah. Well, I mean, what I don't really seem to understand is, at least with Marduk, their first few albums, the lyrics weren't goofy.
No, they were very serious and very dark.
I wouldn't even say serious, but they weren't just like, Jesus Christ, you're grown adults writing this?
Yeah, some of their later lyricism, like especially like you say, the new album is just really simplistic and really kind of like, just, we were required to make a black metal album for 500, Bob.
Well, I think also too, because the singer Mortis, he has his own band still.
True.
And
Yeah.
a
So,
lot of people are under the impression that he's saving his quality work for his own project.
which, depending on
Whether
how
that's true or
dedicated
not,
he
I
is to
can't
Marduk,
say.
could be true or not.
I mean, but that's just it. Who's heard of his bands in
True.
comparison
Yeah.
to, say, Marduk? It's like going from, some underground thrash band to filling in for like Slayer
Yeah, pretty much.
and then phoning it in while you're playing with Slayer.
Yeah, like that's not a good way to like highlight your other band.
Case in point, Gary Holt did not do that.
True.
He has Exodus, that's his band.
And then he's in
But
other
when he
side
was playing
projects.
with Slayer, he gave them 110%.
Yeah, and I think that's like part of the work ethic that makes a successful musician is like, if even if you have your own side projects and whatever, what you're doing with whatever band you do is 100% of what you got at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't phone it in on anything and expect people to give a shit about it. Like, and especially with black metal, they're all in like 3 other bands.
Yeah, me and some of my buddies used to joke back in the day. It's like, one of us would pick up a new album, like, yeah, which other bands are part of this one?
Yeah, right. It's like, and you'll run into that in all the other scenes too, of like, the occasional super group will form with like members of 3 other bands. They all get together, do an album or two, and then go back to their own projects. But with black metal, it seems to be like this constant, like, just carousel of musicians that are all just playing in each other's bands, and it's just like, where
Hmm.
does one band end and the other one start?
Yeah, that is a thing.
Like I know the singer from Emperors and like two other bands. I mean, Tom Warrior from Hellhammer and Celtic Frost ended up in Satyricon, and I think was in a couple other bands in between.
Right.
So it's just like you're gonna run into that, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it actually does. The only thing I see that's an overall negative with that is it does homogenize the sound of the genre very heavily
Hmm.
because they're all playing with the same people and having the same ideas. So everything starts to kind of sound the same after like the late 90s,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, this sounds like Emperor, but it's not Emperor. We're like, oh, this sounds like Marduk, except it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And there are bands that break away from that. Like we mentioned earlier, Dark Funeral is one of them that's kind of managed to stay on the straight and narrow when it comes to their sound.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there is a lot of pressure and a lot of incentive to kind of move towards that, this word sounds hilarious to say, but the big black metal sound where it's just like everybody sounds like this, so you have to.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, in my opinion, antithetical to what black metal is.
Hmm.
Where it's like, no, you're supposed to be as original, as outrageous, and as blasphemous as possible. Like, you
Yeah, that was
can't
the
just
thing I enjoyed
conform.
the most when I started getting into black metal was just discovering all these new bands, and a lot of them all had some kind of sound to them that was their own.
Yeah, like Mayhem sounded very different from Marduk, sounded very different from Dark Throne. None of them sounded like Bathory.
Well, technically Burzum did a little bit, but that's more
Well,
of a
that's because,
rip-off than anything.
they're basically a ripoff of Bathory with worse musicians.
Yeah, yeah, wow.
And then they did that cover of War by Bathory that I like the original way better. And
Yeah.
and that's all without getting into the massive clusterfuck that is their lead singer.
Well, he's the only member of the band. Everybody else he's ever had was a session member.
Well, yeah. Was that true? I thought Burzum had a couple original members, and then they left after a couple of records.
No, he's always used session members like Samoth from Emperor filled in on an album.
Okay. And I feel like that's the best way to experience Varg Vikernes is, you work with him once and then you just never do it again. Because he's
I don't even
that
know about.
guy.
Yeah, he is that guy. There's no question about that.
It's like, oh yeah, he has interesting musical ideas and stuff like that. Too bad he's a fucking lunatic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is a bit of an issue.
Well, I mean, and especially when you're in the extreme metal genres, you kind of have to expect that. I mean, nobody's here because they're a well balanced individual.
Oh, I don't know about all that. I mean, I'm mostly balanced, slightly askew, but
A couple good whacks and we'll get there.
yeah, 2, 3 dozen times they catch right on.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But no, I mean, the first record they had was absolutely outstanding and really a good overall piece too. It wasn't like the songs were decent, but they didn't really mesh together well. Like they basically flow right into one another, which I always appreciate. And that kind of continued on the second one, which is into We Are the Undying, I think. No, Into the Unlight. Sorry, or Those of the Unlight. Jesus Christ.
Those of the unlight.
Yeah, I think I mixed like an Emperor album, a Dark Throne album, and Marduk in there. That was fun.
Yeah. Well,
My brain works sometimes, I swear. Never when the camera's running, of course, but sometimes.
and this is also another great record.
Yeah, and again, look at the album art on that one. Like
And they did the
exactly what
same
you're getting into.
thing with the remaster for that.
Where they just went with a generic dark album cover, like that one
Hmm.
wasn't dark enough. I'm waiting for somebody in black metal to just do a straight black album cover with no embellishments on it of any kind, and just like, oh, it's the darkest thing ever. It's like, yeah, because different shades of black, you idiot.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if that's already been done.
Knowing the modern black metal scene, I would not be surprised if someone's at least had that idea and was told by their management no. If somebody hasn't brought it up, it will happen before long, I promise you. But yeah, I mean, this album was a little less consistent, I think, but still really, really good. I mean, you have the title track, Darkness Breeds Immortality, Sculpture of the Night. All of it's just really high quality. And again, you still have that a little bit of like dark death metal sound to them at this point.
Yeah, this is when they started, pulling away from their death metal roots and leaning more heavily into the black metal. But there is still a lot of death metal influence on this record.
Yeah, like in some of the drumming and a lot of the tone of the guitars, you can really hear the death metal sound still evident. You can tell they're playing around with it, but when in doubt, you go back to what you know. So, like, they were probably playing around in the studio with different tones, but they eventually kind of kept coming back to the one that worked for them in the past. So that, I think, is not. It's not a dig at this record. I mean, bands evolve over time, and when you start out doing black metal stuff in the underground, or death metal stuff in the underground, well, that's the sound you started with. So when you run into a blank spot, you kind of run back to what worked, which there's no harm in that. And again, it made a really solid album overall, especially for album number 2.
Yeah.
Like, black metal kind of has the opposite trend to most genres of music, where like the first couple albums will be meh at best, and then they really kind of find out who they are as a band and then run with that sound the rest of their career. Like, the extreme metal genre is the exact opposite, where their best stuff is their very earliest. I mean, you see that with like all of the big four of thrash. Most of the early black metal artists, including both first and second wave. I mean, let's face it, Venom's first 2 records are by far their best. And then Bathory's first 4 are certainly, in my opinion, their greatest works. I mean, they hit it out of the park on some of the other ones too, like Blazing the Northern Sky or something. No, wait, no, that's fucking Dark Throne. Never mind. Fine Day to Die. That was the one I'm thinking of.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, they do have stuff later on that's better, but I don't think their albums ever got as good as they did originally. And yeah, Soul Assassin, I mean, they will invent, like, what didn't some scientists invent some sort of black color that will actually absorb light?
It's entirely possible.
So like somebody will create an album cover that's entirely coated with that stuff. So it's just like, it's so dark you can't even see it. So you just see the hole where the jewel case is. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the modern bands especially have kind of jumped the shark when it comes to that kind of, like, they go so far with it turns into a caricature.
Yeah,
like a lot of the early bands did that themselves. Like, they were kind of a caricature of over the top darkness and evil, and then like the guys behind them in the third wave took it seriously. And they're like, oh, like what's his name, fucking Gall, where he's like actually over the top satanic, and all the guys behind him are like, oh yeah, we were kidding. But he like actually buys into it. But yeah, I mean, this record, I think this is what, 93, 94, somewhere in there. So let's see, 93.
Yeah, 93, yeah.
So, they're still in the early 90s. Black metal is still kind of in its infancy, especially as its own thing. Like, Venom and Bathory were always kind of compared to like the mainstream thrash bands. And were just kind of this odd little sideshow, and then black metal kind of, with the second wave, kind of boomed up into its own full genre, where it's its own entire style of music with a following and all that. Whereas before it was just kind of, well, if you're into the really heavy shit, then it's over in the corner there. Go play there. Same thing with death metal, really.
Yeah.
Throughout the 80s and into the early 90s, like even death metal was kind of like, oh, you're into that stuff. Okay, well, you know, the dark corner of the room's over there. Whereas this had really gotten into, like, this is a full-on genre. This wasn't just a thing that was going away. And then they kind of continued this pace for the rest of the 1990s until in 1999 we get the last album we're going to talk about today, and my personal favorite Marduk album of all time. We have Panzer Division Marduk, which this album has caused so much controversy for no fucking reason. I can't even describe to you the amount of absolutely idiotic takes I've seen on this record. Where it's like, oh, it's called Panzer Division because, you know, Germans and they were secretly Nazis and all that. It's like, no, they're not. It's like, it's Marduk. If they were actual neo-Nazis, they would tell you. And again, it's one of those really solid records from them where nothing feels out of place. Everything's freaking awesome on it. The album art really fits with what they're talking about, which is mostly just war in general.
Yeah.
But you've got, and I know the reason this album got banned off of Spotify is for two of the songs on there. Soul Assassin. I saw a Centurion on an album cover and I immediately jumped at it. Or in this case, since they're Swedish, that might be a Stridsvagn 84, which was the Swedish variant of the Centurion. But yeah, I mean, this album is I like the atmospherics that they went to. Like you said, they had gone more the black metal sound. So instead of, like, you know, just kind of a normal intro, they had all the, you know, artillery and stuff like that, and German people screaming, which, you know, is associated with all warfare in Europe. Yes, Germany, it's all your fault. We know. But yeah, I mean, this record is just fast. It's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
It's everything black metal does right. And two of the songs on it, we weren't even sure we could say on YouTube for a while, and without getting the stream yeeted. But we'll get to those in their own turn.
Well, we have said them live before, so.
Well, yeah, now we have, which is why I'm doing the episode now, because we just talked about doing this like a year and a half ago, and I'm like, I'm not even sure I can say some of the some of the song titles on this record without getting yeeted. And then we did it on, I think, one of my shows, and nothing got flagged. So, you know, we're good to go for now. But everything on this album freaking slaps. I can't pick out one that's bad. Like, it's all very, very consistent sound. Even the two that are a little more on the controversial side and not really military related, being the two most awesome song titles in history: Christ Raping Black Metal and Fist Fucking God's Planet. Those two are two of the standouts on the record, even musically. They're great tracks, and the rest of it is pretty fantastic too. So if you're a black metal fan, especially if you're just trying to get into the genre, this is pretty indicative of where it was at right about 1999 and 2000. You know, the end of the good times. And Imperitus, did you have this? Did you get this when it came out, or did you hear it later?
No, I got it when it came out.
Oh, awesome.
And it was just like you said, it was one of those things when you heard it, you're like, God damn, yeah, that's Marduk.
Yeah, and again, it's everything black metal and Marduk do well.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
it's to the
many
point
good
where
songs in the
if you
album
want to get
too.
someone into this band, this is the album you hand them.
I don't know about that. Honestly, I would probably go with Opus Nocturne
Okay, I can see that one.
because it's more melodic. Not everything is pure brutal blast beat.
Yeah,
You know,
true.
it gives a little bit more of a variety as to what the band can do, other than just punch you in the face from start to finish.
Yeah, and that's basically what this album does is just give you a fucking concussion from second one.
Yeah, just brutal from beginning of the first track to the end of the last.
And that's kind of unusual even for Marduk albums. Even they kind of slow down towards the middle section a little bit with a couple
Sometimes.
like Dark Endless like was back like the last 2 or 3 songs like have like some of those really long doomy riffs going into it and at least like
Hmm.
there's a pause in the action a little bit so you can kind
Well,
of process what you just heard.
that or to give the drummer a chance to catch his fucking breath.
Yeah, I don't know how a lot of these bands do a show on these albums and not kill their drummer. I mean, the
They're a
guitarists
whole
too. I
different
mean,
breed over there in Scandinavia.
yeah, I mean the guitarists too. I mean, playing a tremolo riff for that or a tremolo pick for riff for that long is insanely taxing on both your hands and your endurance because you're just basically vibrating your hand on the string for what 3-4 minutes in a lot of these cases. A lot of
Yeah.
these songs are 3.5-4 minutes long. And then you get a break for like 30 seconds while they introduce the next one and then go again.
Yeah.
So like I can only imagine what they're like live or after a live show. They must just be like in intensive care afterwards. keeping
Yeah,
ox-
but I
keeping
think
oxygen
after a
mask
while
backstage for the drummer.
I think after a while your body just gets used to it too.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to be drumming a black metal band, you probably do cardio like every day of the week, building up to a tour. Like, yeah, I cannot over exercise at this point. I'm going to need every ounce of endurance I've got. Yeah, and yeah, well, I mean, the Scandinavians do have a habit for that, don't they?
Yeah, we kind of do. We kind of do.
Yeah, and I mean, being the musical version of raping and pillaging is kind of what Swedish black metal is all about.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, Marduk is one of those cases where it's just interesting because you could see a shift in their lyrics after this album.
Yeah,
Because up until this point, it was a lot of satanic stuff, a little bit about war, general just darkness, shall we say.
which is really in line with more of the classic black metal stuff, like war, death, suffering,
Yeah.
the devil, shit like that. Like that's all right up their alley.
But then after this album, it seems like they focused more on the war aspect.
Well, because this album was really popular and everyone responded really well, so they're like, "Oh, okay, well, we'll go down that route then."
Yeah, but while that might be true, it's one of those things where it's, yeah, I kind of think though that people like the sound, not so much the lyrical content.
That's true as well, and I can see the direction that they went is like, okay, people responded really well to this. And again, almost like the Black Album for Metallica, I can see why they would do that and that it was a fun diversion, but they kind of, like you say, kind of after this kind of drift away from what made them Marduk in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, some of the releases after this are still quite solid. It's just,
Oh, yeah. It's just different and maybe not in the best way. And I think this is their high watermark in terms of musical production and in terms of aggression. Like this is certainly where they were at their fastest.
yeah. Oh, and Soul Assassin, all I got to say to that comment is Vikings were one of two groups of people that had prayers written specifically to ward them off.
Yeah, pretty much.
And the others were the Huns and the Mongols.
Well, yeah, because at that point, God's the only thing that's going to stop them.
And he didn't.
No, he did not. And yes, I've been at a Sabaton show and actually rode in the mosh pit. It's fun. Which the funny part is, apparently, Swedish Pagans is one of Joachim's least favorite songs. Everyone, he hates playing it, and he has to play it every show. I don't know how much he plays that up and how much of that is true, but even on stage, he's like, "Really? Are we going to play this one now?" All right.
Oh, you got to make the fans happy.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I think he plays it up more for comedic effect because those guys are hilarious live, and I want to see Marduk live. Although living down where I live, I doubt that's going to happen anytime soon.
Oh, so they really haven't toured the States a whole bunch over the years, so.
They toured a couple of years ago. I think what was like 20.
They have toured the States. They just don't do it very often.
Which is typical of black metal bands. I mean, a lot of them aren't allowed to play in the States. A lot of them have been banned from the country. Some of them just don't tour here.
Some bands just don't tour.
Yeah, a lot of black metal artists, good luck seeing them on tour because they just don't.
They just
Bathory
don't.
was like that.
Abigorn Summoning are like that.
Yeah, and like I said, Bathory was like that from minute one. I think they only ever did one tour around Sweden, and that was it.
And the funny thing is when I put out my video for Summoning, I had Wake Down do the editing for me, and he's like, "Oh, well, don't worry about he's like, I'll find pictures." I'm like, "No, you won't."
No, you won't. It never happened.
I was like, they're not known for being, a public-facing band.
No, they're in fact the opposite of they operate almost behind this veil of secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like Ghost was at the start, where nobody knows even who's in the band, let alone what they do or what they look like.
Right. And the only actual band photo that he found of them was when when Summoning was still a 3-piece, which was only their first album. And they looked like a bunch of teenagers.
Because they were a bunch of teenagers.
They probably were, yeah.
I mean, a lot of these bands, especially from that era, like they started when they were like 17, 18 years old.
Oh, yeah. I
mean, I think a couple of these bands, Marduk might be one of them. I don't think so, but maybe. I know Mayhem was. Like, some of them were still in high school.
Yeah.
And this was kind of a side project and just kind of blew up out of all proportion. But yeah, man, I cannot expound on how great this album is enough. Like I said, it's my favorite Marduk album of all time. It's fast, it's brutal. If you're looking for something relaxing to listen to, this is not it.
Yeah, it's not Marduk as a whole, really.
No, not really. They're always pretty fast and pretty aggressive, but they kind of cranked it up to another level.
There's only a couple of black metal artists that I can would say is relaxing.
Yeah.
And the only ones that cross my head are Summoning and Caladan Brood.
I was going to say Caladan Brood definitely qualifies with that with me. Yeah, I can see Summoning being like that too. But we'll get to those guys in their own time. I know you've already done a review on both of them on your channel, so if you guys are interested,
I reviewed the only Caladan Brood record, and I reviewed one of the many Summoning discs.
And that's another one of the disappointing things about black metal is if you find an album from a band you really like, there may not be another one.
Yeah, there's been a few bands that I've gotten into over the years. Like there's this one Norwegian band that came around called Kvist, Kvist. They recorded one record and then never did anything ever again as far as metal's concerned.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not relegated to black metal alone. I mean, one of the first albums I ever did a review of on this channel, Fortress's first record, they just did that one album and then broke up.
Right.
Which is unfortunate because it was an absolute fucking banger of a record.
Yeah, the Kvist record was good too. It was good,
yeah,
solid.
I listened to that one and I was just like, so you're telling me there's no more of this? God damn it. Like, why did you have to leave? This was good. Like Caladan Brood too.
I don't know what's going on with them.
Like that album's awesome. Somebody kidnapped them and put them back in the studio. I need more of it. But yeah, man, with that all being said, what do you got coming up, man?
Putting together a few things, actually. Going to be doing a Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough. It sounds like it's going to be me, Matt from Foulball, Zax, and Mark the Cyborg, so that should be entertaining.
That's going to be an absolute shit show, and I will watch all of it because it's going to be absolutely hysterical, especially Matt figuring out what's going on.
Well, he's already playing it.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. He's been playing it for a while. I mentioned it to him. He's like, yeah, we should absolutely do that. You know, he was all about the idea.
Outstanding.
And other than that, some of the other guys I game with, we're going to be doing some stuff in the near future. If you don't follow him, follow Arcasul on Twitter and Twitch.
Yes, follow Arcasul. He's absolutely hysterical.
Yeah, he can be, yeah. And then we were talking last night about some stuff coming up on a regular basis, including some grand strategy nights. Yeah, that is the record, Soul Assassin.
But yeah, no, that could be interesting. I know you and me have talked about doing Stellaris.
That was what was mentioned.
Because that could be awesome. If I have a day that I can just set aside and we can just do it.
One of the other guys knows how to play Hearts of Iron 4, so we were talking about that as well.
Yeah, I need to learn how to play Hearts of Iron 4 because
from what he said, from what I was told, that is easier to figure out than Stellaris.
Oh, okay. If that's the case, then I can figure that out.
That's what he said. I mean, I didn't really have a problem figuring out Stellaris.
Yeah, for some reason I could never figure out Hearts of Iron though.
No, but you can do
like
some
all the micromanaging, just kind of. I have the attention span of a bug, so all the micromanaging is like, oh, well, I'm doing all this. Why is my money going down? Uh-oh.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the economic side stuff kind of got a little out of hand, and I may or may not have just imploded, which also happens to me in Stellaris, so that could just be a me thing.
Yeah.
Where I see the big number in the corner and then start spending until it's a little number and then a red number.
Well, Chad, I think we're going to be doing it over multiple evenings because you can't do
a Stellaris campaign in like a 2-hour stream.
No.
It's going to be like, we'll set aside a day, record all of it.
Well, here's the thing too, is I don't know how much, everything, as we were talking last night, is going to be a case-by-case basis on whether it's going to be streamed or not.
Yeah.
But at the very least, it's going to be recorded and probably given to someone like either I Can See Pixels or Nazmir.
Yeah,
to chop up and do like the best of kind of deal.
Yeah, either that or like, we'll send it to somebody like me, I'll cut it up, and then we'll post it on somebody's channel. Like as in like 2-3 hour chunks.
Yeah.
Almost like Black Pants Legion does with a lot of their grand strategy stuff, where a lot of it is jackassery and random stupidity. But
and guys, not to plug another person's channel, but if you want some entertaining content about BattleTech and just some random lunatics gaming, go look up the Black Pants Legion.
You will not regret it, even just for Tech Talks BattleTech. I think that's probably he's probably the most entertaining BattleTech creator out there. If you're into the lore of BattleTech, check out Sven Vanderplank as well.
He's good, and so is Big Red.
Have you been following Sven's finally doing the first Succession War, which I think he's the first one to really go into that.
No, the last thing I watched as far as BattleTech was Tex's video on the Hunchback.
Yeah, Sven just did a series on the Star League Civil War and is going into the first Succession War. So we're going into like the most bloody era of BattleTech.
Yeah, he does, Soul Assassin.
Yeah, Razor is a huge BattleTech nerd, and I've seen WBPL. They have a lot of really great shit. So definitely, if you're on Twitch, go check them out. They are streaming, I think, 24/7 with members of the Legion because it's a whole group of them. And check them out. And as for me, I just got a new internet connection, so I may try to test stream on Twitch and see if I can do some more BattleTech stuff. And if that works, maybe something else. Other than that, you can catch me here every Sunday for Rock and Roll Religion. And I'll try to get back to doing some random fandom stuff. Maybe we'll go back through some Warhammer 40K or maybe even Warhammer Fantasy stuff, which I'm really getting into the lore of now. And with that all being said, thanks for coming by. Take care. Stay safe. I love you all. And I'll catch you next time.
Have a good one, folks.